The massive crystalline doors of the Galactic Council's judgment chamber ground open with a sound like breaking planets. Ambassador Marcus Kane stepped through, his polished black uniform a stark contrast to the swirling nebula of colors that made up the chamber's walls. Behind him walked three other humans, their faces masks of controlled tension as they entered the most powerful governing body in the galaxy. The chamber stretched impossibly wide, its ceiling lost in artificial darkness punctuated by the light of 1,000 alien homeworlds. Arranged in towering semicircular tiers sat the representatives of 847 species. Their forms ranged from the elegant gas wraiths of Epsilon Prime to the crystalline behemoths of the Seventh Ring. At the chamber's apex, 12 beings so ancient their species' names had been forgotten, watched with eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations. Kane's footsteps echoed as he approached the central dais. The silence was deafening. Every being in the chamber knew why humanity had been summoned. 3 days ago, Commander Lisa Park of the human vessel Defiant had destroyed the hegemony battle station Sovereign's Pride. 12,000 aliens were dead, and someone would pay. High Arbiter Voss, its form shifting like liquid starlight, leaned forward from the central throne. Its voice was a harmony of frequencies that made Kane's bones vibrate. Ambassador Kane of Earth, you stand accused of harboring a war criminal. Commander Lisa Park of your military vessel Defiant is wanted for the destruction of the hegemony battle station, Sovereign's Pride. Kane's jaw tightened. The hegemony was a militaristic empire spanning 40 systems, known for their aggressive expansion and brutal tactics. Their battle station had been bombarding civilian colonies when Park intervened. With respect, High Arbiter, Kane replied, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Commander Park acted in defense of innocent lives. The Sovereign's Pride was engaged in systematic genocide of the colonists on Theta Prime. A ripple of movement went through the alien representatives. The insectoid delegate from Keth Prime clicked its mandibles in disapproval. Several reptilian species hissed their displeasure. The hegemony's ambassador, General Thorne, stepped forward from his position among the military powers. Thorne was a massive reptilian creature, his scaled hide reflecting the chamber's light like armor. His yellow eyes fixed on Kane with predatory intensity. The human speaks of defense, Thorne said, his voice like grinding metal. But their commander destroyed a vessel containing 12,000 of my people. This cannot stand unpunished. Kane felt the weight of nearly 1,000 alien gazes upon him. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for only 50 years, still newcomers by galactic standards. They were tolerated, even respected for their rapid technological advancement, but they were still seen as impulsive children by most species. General Thorne, Kane said carefully, choosing his words with diplomatic precision, your people were warned repeatedly to cease their bombardment. Commander Park gave your vessel 18 separate opportunities to withdraw. She acted only when it became clear that Theta Colony's entire population would be exterminated. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien sounds. Some species voiced support for the humans. Others demanded immediate justice. The crystalline beings chimed like broken bells, while the gas wraiths whispered in frequencies that hurt human ears. Through it all, High Arbiter Voss remained silent, its ancient eyes studying Kane. Finally, Voss raised one translucent hand, and silence fell like a hammer blow. The methods matter less than the result, Ambassador. A hegemony vessel was destroyed. By galactic law, Commander Park must face trial for war crimes. Kane's mind raced. He could see the trap closing around not just Park, but all of humanity. If they handed over Park, it would set a precedent that human military commanders could be seized at will by any species with a grievance. If they refused, humanity would be branded as harboring criminals and could face expulsion from the Council. Behind Kane, Dr. Elena Vasquez shifted nervously. As Earth's chief xenobiologist, she understood alien psychology better than most humans. She had warned Kane that this hearing was not about justice but about power. The hegemony wanted to make an example of humanity before their rapid advancement made them a real threat. High Arbiter, Kane said, his voice growing stronger. I formally request to review the complete combat logs from the Defiant before any decision is made. Surely the Council values complete information before passing judgment on one of its members. General Thorne's scales flushed a deep red, the hegemony equivalent of rage. The human seeks to delay justice. The facts are clear. A hegemony vessel was destroyed. Their commander must pay. The human seeks truth, Kane replied, turning to face the assembled representatives. If the council passes judgment without examining all evidence, what separates us from the very tyranny we claim to oppose? The words hit their mark. Several species that had been neutral began to murmur among themselves. The gas wraiths, who valued knowledge above all else, whispered their support. Even some of the military species seemed thoughtful. High Arbiter Voss conferred with its 11 companions in frequencies beyond human hearing. The ancient beings communicated in harmonics that predated most species in the galaxy. When they finished, Voss spoke. The request is granted. The combat logs will be reviewed by the Council's Tactical Committee. This session is adjourned until tomorrow. As the chamber began to empty, Kane felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. He had bought time, but time for what? Earth was 27 light-years away, and Commander Park was already in hegemony custody, taken during what was supposed to be peace negotiations. Dr. Vasquez moved close to Kane as they walked toward the exit. "Marcus," she whispered urgently, "there's something you need to know about those combat logs. Something the hegemony doesn't realize we recorded." Kane turned, seeing the gleam in Elena's eyes. Perhaps humanity's reputation for surprising their opponents was about to be proven once again. But even as hope flickered, he knew the real battle was just beginning. Behind them, General Thorne was already sending an encrypted message to his fleet. The humans thought they were clever, but the hegemony had contingencies. If the Council wouldn't deliver Park for execution, then perhaps it was time to collect her directly. And if Earth wanted to protect their war criminals, they would learn what happened to species who defied hegemony justice. 47 worlds had already learned that lesson. Soon, Earth would join them. The judgment chamber fell silent as the last representatives departed, but the echo of Kane's words lingered in the artificial atmosphere. Truth versus power, justice versus expediency. The galaxy was about to discover which force would prove stronger when humanity was threatened. In the depths of space, massive engines began to turn as hegemony battle fleets changed course toward a small blue world called Earth. The Tactical Committee's review chamber hummed with the energy of a dozen different technological systems working in harmony. Holographic displays showed the Theta system where the incident occurred, while alien officials from 17 different species examined data streams that painted space in precise detail. The air itself seemed to shimmer with electromagnetic fields, as different species used their preferred scanning methods. Ambassador Kane stood before the reviewing panel, his hands clasped behind his back as the committee's lead analyst manipulated the three-dimensional display. Prime Evaluator Nexus was a tall, luminescent being, whose crystalline form reflected the holographic light like a living prism. Its voice chimed like distant bells as it spoke. "The initial engagement parameters are clear," Nexus intoned, gesturing toward the display where two ships faced each other in the void. The hegemony vessel Sovereign's Pride was conducting what they term population restructuring of Theta Colony. The human vessel Defiant approached and transmitted warnings. The hologram showed the massive hegemony battle station, bristling with weapons and 10 times the size of the sleek human ship. General Thorne, present as an observer, stood rigid as stone. His reptilian features showed no emotion, but Kane had learned to read the subtle color changes in hegemony scales. "My people were within their rights," Thorne stated flatly. Theta Colony had been designated a military target due to rebel activity. The colonists were harboring terrorists who attacked hegemony supply convoys. Kane bit back his immediate response. The rebel activity Thorne mentioned had consisted of farmers refusing to hand over 90% of their crops to feed hegemony expansion fleets. The so-called terrorists were families who wanted to keep enough food to feed their children. Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped forward, a datapad clutched in her hands. Her xenobiology training had taught her to read alien body language, and she could see that several committee members were uncomfortable with Thorne's explanation. "Prime Evaluator," she said carefully, "if I may direct your attention to timestamp 142317. The Defiant's sensors recorded something highly unusual during the engagement. The holographic display zoomed in on the Sovereign's Pride. Suddenly, energy readings spiked around the battle station's primary weapon array. The readings were unlike anything in standard galactic databases. Counselor Vect, a crystalline being whose species had been mediating galactic disputes for millennia, leaned forward. What exactly are we observing, Dr. Vasquez? The Sovereign's Pride was charging its planetary bombardment cannon, Vasquez explained, highlighting specific energy signatures in the display. But look at the energy pattern here. This isn't standard orbital bombardment. This is a core cracker charge. The chamber fell silent. Core cracker weapons were banned by 17 different galactic treaties. They didn't just destroy surface installations or military targets. They cracked planets open like eggs, making entire worlds uninhabitable for thousands of years. General Thorne's scales flushed from deep green to bright red. Impossible. The hegemony has signed every treaty banning such weapons. Our forces do not use core cracker technology. Perhaps not officially, Kane said quietly, stepping beside Vasquez. But energy signatures don't lie. Commander Park wasn't just stopping a bombardment. She was preventing the complete destruction of an entire world and everyone on it. Prime Evaluator Nexus manipulated the display, running the energy readings through multiple analysis protocols. Its crystalline form pulsed with different colors as it processed the data. The human sensor data appears authentic. However, this presents a significant accusation against a council member species. An accusation based solely on human sensor readings, Thorne snarled, his voice taking on a threatening edge. How convenient that only their sensors detected this supposed weapon signature. Perhaps the humans have fabricated this evidence to justify their commander's war crimes. Kane felt his temper flare but kept his voice level. General, are you suggesting that humanity would doctor evidence and present it to the council? That we would risk our membership and reputation on fabricated data? I'm suggesting that humans are known for their creativity, Thorne replied coldly. And desperate species often resort to desperate measures. Dr. Vasquez smiled, and Kane recognized the expression. Elena had been holding back information, waiting for exactly this moment. Actually, General, she said sweetly, the human sensors weren't the only ones recording that day. She activated her data pad, and the holographic display shifted to show a new perspective. This time the view came from Theta Colony itself, transmitted through their early warning system before the hegemony occupation. The colony's defense network was still operational during the incident, Vasquez continued. We managed to retrieve their complete sensor logs through quantum entanglement communicators before your forces destroyed the transmission arrays. The colony's readings matched the Defiance perfectly. The energy signature was unmistakable. The Sovereign's Pride had indeed been charging a planet-killer weapon when Commander Park made her decision to fire. The committee members exchanged glances that transcended species barriers. If this evidence was authentic, the hegemony hadn't just been conducting military operations. They had been preparing to commit genocide on a scale that violated every principle the Galactic Council claimed to uphold. But General Thorne was already backing toward the chamber's exit. His scales had shifted to the pale yellow that indicated extreme stress among his species. This committee has no authority over internal hegemony military affairs, he declared. The human park destroyed a hegemony vessel and killed 12,000 of my people. She will face justice, General Waite called Counselor Vecht. These findings require further investigation. If the hegemony is developing prohibited weapons, the hegemony recognizes only strength, Thorne interrupted, his voice filled with barely controlled rage. We have spent centuries bringing order to chaos, civilizing primitive worlds and maintaining peace through superior force. And since this council seems more interested in protecting human criminals than upholding galactic law, perhaps it's time my people reminded the galaxy what real strength looks like. The general's final words carried an unmistakable threat as he stalked from the chamber. Kane felt ice forming in his veins. The hegemony had never been known for accepting defeat gracefully, and Thorne's reaction suggested they had no intention of letting this matter end with a council decision. Prime Evaluator Nexus turned its luminescent form toward Kane. Ambassador, this evidence significantly alters our understanding of the incident. However, Commander Park remains in hegemony custody. I fear General Thorne's departure suggests they have no intention of releasing her for proper trial. Kane nodded grimly. Then I formally request an emergency session of the full council. If the hegemony is developing planet-killer weapons in violation of galactic law, this goes far beyond one commander's actions. As if summoned by his words, alarms suddenly began blaring throughout the station. A communications officer rushed into the chamber, his face pale with shock. Prime Evaluator. Long-range sensors are detecting a massive hegemony fleet movement. 37 battlecruisers have just entered the Sol system. The pieces clicked together in Kane's mind with horrifying clarity. The trial had been a distraction. While humanity's attention was focused on the Council proceedings, the hegemony had been positioning their forces for something much worse than executing one commander. They were preparing to make an example of Earth itself. Admiral Janet Hayes stood on the bridge of Earth's orbital defense station, watching 37 hegemony battlecruisers arrange themselves in perfect formation around humanity's home system. Each vessel was nearly a kilometer long, bristling with weapons that could crack continents. The sight was both magnificent and terrifying, like watching a storm gather on the horizon. Through the main view screen, she could see the flagship clearly. The Retribution was a massive dreadnought that held position directly between Earth and Mars, its weapons arrays aimed at the blue world below. The other ships formed concentric circles around the system, effectively surrounding humanity's home. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Torres from the communication station, his voice tight with controlled fear. "We're receiving a transmission from the hegemony flagship." "On screen," Hayes ordered, straightening her uniform. Whatever was coming, Earth needed to show strength. General Thorne's reptilian features filled the main display. His scales had shifted to deep crimson, which Hayes recognized as hegemony battle color. Behind him, the bridge of the Retribution hummed with military efficiency as alien officers worked at stations designed for war. "Admiral Hayes," Thorne began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "I bring greetings from the hegemony empire. We have come to collect the war criminal Lisa Park and to ensure that humanity understands the consequences of defying galactic justice." Hayes kept her expression neutral, despite the ice forming in her veins. Earth's defense fleet consisted of 12 ships, cutting-edge by human standards but hopelessly outnumbered. The humans had always known this day might come, but theory was different from facing overwhelming force. "General Thorne," she replied carefully, "Commander Park is not currently on Earth. As I understand it, she remains in hegemony custody following the peace negotiations." Thorne's laugh was like grinding metal, harsh and without humor. "Indeed she is. But her execution this morning was merely the beginning. Humanity must learn that there are consequences for harboring criminals and interfering with hegemony operations." The words hit Hayes like a physical blow. Around the bridge, she watched her officers struggle to process what they had just heard. Lisa Park, brilliant tactical commander and mother of two, had been executed while diplomats debated legal technicalities. "You executed her?" Hayes asked, her voice deadly quiet. "The council proceedings are still ongoing. She was under diplomatic protection." "The council talks while the hegemony acts," Thorne interrupted, leaning forward in his command chair. "Commander Park paid for her crimes at dawn. Now humanity will pay for theirs." Hayes felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. The diplomatic process had failed. The Galactic Council's protection meant nothing when faced with species who respected only force. "What exactly are you demanding, General?" "Unconditional surrender of all human military forces," Thorne declared. "Dissolution of your defense fleets, and the establishment of hegemony oversight over all human space operations." His predatory eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "You have 1 hour to comply, or we will demonstrate why 47 other species have chosen to accept hegemony protection rather than face hegemony justice." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Hayes looked around at her crew, seeing fear but also determination. These were people who had joined Earth's defense forces knowing they might one day face impossible odds. "Commander Wright," she called to her tactical officer, "what's our strategic assessment?" Wright, a veteran of the colonial conflicts, studied his displays grimly. 37 to 12 odds, Admiral. Their ships are larger, better armed, and they're positioned to hit both Earth and the outer colonies simultaneously. He paused, meeting her eyes. "Militarily speaking, we don't have a chance in a conventional engagement." "Good thing humanity rarely fights conventionally," Hayes replied. She opened a channel to the rest of the fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Hayes. As of this moment, we are at war. Not because we chose it, but because the hegemony believes might makes right." She took a breath, thinking of the billions of humans throughout the solar system who were depending on the next few minutes. "They've executed Commander Park. They demand our complete surrender." I'm not going to pretend we can outgun them, but we don't need to outgun them. We need to outthink them. Hayes turned to her communications officer. Signal all units. Implement Protocol 7. Throughout the fleet, human vessels began what appeared to be a fighting withdrawal toward the outer system. To the hegemony forces, it looked like typical human cowardice. The smaller ships fled before superior firepower, just as dozens of other species had done. General Thorne watched the human retreat with satisfaction. Typical human response. They run when faced with real power. He turned to his tactical officer. Signal the planetary bombardment squadrons. Begin with their industrial centers. I want them to watch their infrastructure burn before they surrender. But as the hegemony forces moved deeper into the solar system, pursuing what they thought was a broken enemy, something unexpected began to happen. The human ships weren't just retreating randomly. They were leading the alien fleet through specific corridors of space, drawing them away from Earth and toward the asteroid belt. Then the asteroids began to move. What the hegemony had dismissed as routine asteroid mining operations revealed themselves as an intricate network of hidden weapons platforms, camouflaged ships, and orbital defense stations. For 50 years, humanity had been quietly turning their entire solar system into the galaxy's most sophisticated military fortification. Impossible, breathed Thorne as his sensors registered hundreds of new contacts. The humans hadn't been mining asteroids for resources. They had been building a defense network that turned every piece of space debris into a potential weapon. Concealed weapon platforms emerged from hollowed-out asteroids like deadly flowers blooming. Stealth frigates decloaked from behind what had appeared to be simple mining stations. The entire asteroid belt transformed into a three-dimensional maze of overlapping fire zones, each position carefully calculated for maximum tactical advantage. Admiral Hayes smiled grimly as her trap closed around the hegemony fleet. From her command center hidden within Ceres itself, she could see the alien formation beginning to break apart as they realized their mistake. General Thorne, she transmitted on an open channel, you wanted to teach humanity about consequences. Allow us to return the favor. The first salvo erupted from concealed positions throughout the asteroid belt. Weapons that had been disguised as mining equipment revealed their true purpose as kinetic projectiles and energy beams lanced out toward the hegemony ships. The carefully planned crossfire turned space into a deadly web that the aliens had walked directly into. For the first time in the hegemony's expansion, they found themselves wondering if they had finally bitten off more than they could chew. The humans had been patient, building their defenses while appearing weak and defenseless. But as Admiral Hayes watched the battle begin, she knew this was only the opening move. The real test of humanity's resolve was yet to come. The space between Mars and Jupiter erupted into chaos as humanity's hidden defense network came fully online. What had appeared to be a simple asteroid field revealed itself as the most sophisticated military fortification in galactic history. Concealed weapon platforms emerged from hollowed-out asteroids, stealth frigates decloaked from behind mining stations, and the entire belt transformed into a three-dimensional maze of overlapping fire zones. General Thorne watched in growing alarm as his tactical display filled with new contacts. The neat formation of his fleet was dissolving as ships tried to avoid the crossfire emerging from every direction. How many ships do these humans have? Sir, his tactical officer replied, mandibles clicking nervously. We're reading over 300 contacts, but the signatures are unusual. Many appear to be converted civilian vessels. Thorne snarled in frustration. The humans had turned cargo haulers into missile platforms, mining ships into torpedo boats, and research vessels into electronic warfare units. It was a patchwork fleet held together by desperation and human ingenuity, but it was working with devastating effectiveness. Admiral Hayes coordinated the defense from her command ship, now revealed to be hidden within Ceres itself. The asteroid had been hollowed out over decades, turned into a mobile command center and weapons platform that the hegemony still couldn't locate properly among the chaos of battle. Admiral, reported Commander Wright, his voice tight with concentration. The hegemony is attempting to reform their battle line, but our harassment squadrons are keeping them disrupted. Their formation discipline is breaking down. Hayes nodded, watching the tactical display as human ships darted between asteroids like wolves among sheep. The hegemony ships were individually more powerful, but they had been trained for formal space battles against organized fleets. They were struggling to adapt to humanity's guerrilla tactics. The alien commanders expected neat battle lines and predictable movements. Instead, they faced an enemy that appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking from unexpected angles before vanishing back into the asteroid field. "Signal the outer perimeter," Hayes ordered. "Begin Phase 2. Beyond the asteroid belt, hidden among the moons of Saturn and Jupiter, the second wave of humanity's defense revealed itself. These weren't ships at all. They were the gas giant mining platforms, massive industrial complexes that had been secretly refitted with railguns and mass drivers. The first salvo caught the hegemony completely by surprise. Tungsten rods, accelerated to crushing velocities by electromagnetic fields, slammed into the rear elements of Thorn's fleet. 3 battlecruisers simply ceased to exist, vaporized by kinetic impacts that released more energy than tactical nuclear weapons. "Pull back," Thorn roared, his scales now pale with fear. "Reform at Grid 77 Alpha." But the humans weren't giving him time to reorganize. As the hegemony fleet tried to withdraw, they found their escape routes blocked by fields of autonomous mines that had been quietly deployed during the initial engagement. Ships that tried to retreat ran into walls of explosives that erupted like deadly flowers. Meanwhile, at the Galactic Council station, Ambassador Kane received real-time updates on the battle through quantum entanglement communicators. The news of Commander Park's execution had hit him like a physical blow, but he forced himself to focus on the larger crisis unfolding around Earth. Prime Evaluator Nexus, Kane addressed the crystalline being. "The hegemony has just invaded human space and executed a commander who was under Council protection. This is a clear violation of galactic law." Nexus rippled with what Kane had learned to recognize as distress. "The situation has escalated beyond our initial parameters. However, the Council's ability to intervene in active military conflicts is limited by our charter. Then, perhaps it's time to consider whether an organization that can't protect its own proceedings is worth maintaining." Kane replied coldly. The words sent a shockwave through the assembled representatives. The Galactic Council's authority depended on the voluntary cooperation of member species. If humanity withdrew and took their rapidly advancing technology with them, it would set a precedent that could unravel the entire galactic order. Back in Sol System, General Thorn was beginning to realize that he had made a critical error. The humans weren't just defending themselves. They were hunting his fleet systematically. Small squadrons of converted civilian ships were targeting his logistics vessels, the supply ships that kept his battle fleet operational. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're losing contact with Supply Group Beta, and the humans are jamming our long-range communications. We can't call for reinforcements." Thorn's scales had shifted from battle crimson to the pale yellow of fear. His fleet was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that refused to engage in the kind of formal battle he understood. Every time his ships tried to form up for a proper assault, the humans would fade away like smoke only to reappear somewhere else entirely. Worse, the human tactics were unlike anything in hegemony military doctrine. They fought like pirates and raiders, not like a proper military force. Ships would emerge from asteroid shadows, fire a devastating salvo, then disappear before his forces could respond. Admiral Hayes watched the hegemony fleet's growing disorganization with grim satisfaction. Humanity had learned hard lessons from their first contact with hostile alien species. They had studied every major galactic conflict, identified the tactical patterns most species relied on, and prepared accordingly. The hegemony fought like most galactic military forces, with rigid formations, clear hierarchies, and standardized tactics that worked well against other conventional forces. But humans had never been conventional. "Admiral," Wright reported, "the enemy is attempting to regroup near the orbit of Mars. Should we pursue and finish them?" Hayes considered carefully. Her forces had bloodied the hegemony fleet badly, but Thorn still had enough ships to devastate Earth if he was willing to accept heavy losses. She needed to end this decisively, with a demonstration that would convince not just the hegemony, but the entire galaxy that humanity was not to be threatened. "Signal all units," she commanded. "Implement final protocol. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity's home." In the deepest levels of the moon, machinery that had been built in absolute secrecy for 50 years began to hum with power. Massive fusion reactors came online, feeding energy into systems that had never been tested at full capacity. Throughout Luna's core, gravitational stabilizers engaged to prevent the moon from shaking itself apart. Humanity's final surprise was about to be revealed. The hegemony had come to Sol's system expecting to face a primitive species with limited defenses. Instead, they had walked into a trap 50 years in the making, designed by a species that had learned the hard way that in a hostile galaxy, only strength guaranteed survival. The real demonstration of human power was about to begin. The lunar surface split open like a mechanical flower, revealing the project that had consumed a third of humanity's industrial capacity for 5 decades. Rising from the moon's hidden depths came Excalibur, a mass driver the size of a small city, capable of accelerating projectiles to 90% of light speed. The weapon system emerged from what every alien intelligence service had believed was a simple research station. General Thorne watched in growing horror as the massive weapon revealed itself, its barrel pointing directly at his battered fleet. That's impossible. Our surveillance showed only standard scientific installations on the human moon. His tactical officer's voice shook with fear. Sir, that weapon system could punch through our heaviest armor like it was paper. If they target our fleet with that thing, nothing will survive. They won't dare, Thorne snarled, but uncertainty crept into his voice for the first time. Firing a weapon of that magnitude near their own planet would be suicide. The radiation alone would sterilize their homeworld. Admiral Hayes stood in Excalibur's command center, built deep into the lunar bedrock itself. Through the reinforced viewing ports, she could see Earth hanging in space like a blue jewel, beautiful, fragile, worth every sacrifice humanity had made to protect it. Admiral, the weapons officer reported, Excalibur is fully charged and locked onto the Hegemony flagship. Single shot will vaporize everything within a kilometer radius of impact. Hayes nodded, then opened a communication channel that would reach every ship in the solar system, human and alien alike. Her words would be heard not just by the battle fleets, but by observers throughout the galaxy who were monitoring the confrontation. General Thorne. Her voice carried clearly across space. 50 years ago, humanity learned that the galaxy was a dangerous place. We've spent every day since then preparing for exactly this moment. You came here to teach us about consequences. Consider this your education in human resolve. The warning shot fired past the Retribution's bow at 91% of light speed, close enough that the energy wake disabled half the Dreadnought's sensor array. The tungsten rod continued on, striking an abandoned asteroid and converting it into expanding plasma in a flash of light, visible from Earth's surface. Silence filled the communication channels. The demonstration had been perfectly calculated, close enough to show Excalibur's precision, powerful enough to prove its devastating capability. Even the most aggressive species in the galaxy understood what they had just witnessed. Now, Hayes continued, you have a choice. Withdraw your forces immediately, or discover what happens when humanity decides that peace is no longer an option. At the Galactic Council Station, the emergency session was in chaos. Representatives from dozens of species demanded answers as reports of the battle reached them through quantum communicators. The hegemony, considered one of the galaxy's 3 major military powers, was being systematically dismantled by a species that most still considered newcomers. Ambassador Kane stood before the assembled council, no longer the diplomatic petitioner who had arrived days earlier. The execution of Commander Park had changed something fundamental in humanity's relationship with the galaxy, and every being in the chamber could sense it. Honored representatives, Kane began, his voice cutting through the chaos. For 50 years, humanity has sought peace through cooperation. We joined the council, followed galactic law, and tried to be good galactic citizens. Today we learned the price of that cooperation. He activated a holographic display showing the battle in Sol's system. The hegemony executed a human commander for preventing genocide. They invaded human space with the intent of forcing our complete surrender. They have demonstrated that for some species, law means nothing and only strength matters. Prime Evaluator Nexus rippled with concern. Ambassador Kane, surely this conflict can be resolved through mediation and negotiation. The Council exists to prevent exactly this kind of military escalation. No, Kane interrupted, and the finality in his voice silenced the chamber. Commander Park died believing that the Council would protect the innocent and uphold justice. That belief cost her life. Humanity will not make that mistake again. Kane looked up at the assembled representatives, his gaze touching on species from across the galaxy. From this day forward, humanity withdraws from all Council military cooperation agreements. We will defend ourselves and our allies as we see fit. Any species that threatens human space or human lives will face the consequences without the protection of galactic law. The implications sent shockwaves through the assembly. Humanity was effectively declaring themselves outside the established galactic order, but with technology that made them impossible to ignore. Back in Sol System, General Thorne stared at the remains of the asteroid that Excalibur had vaporized. His proud fleet was battered, his supply lines cut, and now he faced a weapon that could eliminate his entire force with a handful of shots. The humans had been patient, building their defenses while appearing weak and defensible. "Sir," his tactical officer whispered, "recommend immediate withdrawal. We cannot win this engagement." Thorne's pride warred with his survival instincts. The hegemony had never retreated from an inferior force, but as he watched human ships emerging from hidden positions throughout the asteroid belt, he realized that humanity had never been inferior. They had simply been patient, preparing for this day. "Signal general withdrawal," he ordered, his voice hollow with defeat. All ships returned to hegemony space. Maximum speed. Admiral Hayes watched the hegemony fleet limp away, noting the damage patterns on their hulls. They would carry word of this battle back to their empire, and that word would spread throughout the galaxy. Humanity had drawn a line in space and defended it with devastating effectiveness. But Hayes felt no satisfaction in the victory. Commander Park was still dead, and the galaxy had proven that its laws meant nothing when convenient to ignore them. The diplomatic process had failed, leaving only the logic of force. "Signal all commanders," Hayes ordered. "Begin Phase 2 of the Fortress Protocol. If the galaxy wants to play by hegemony rules, then humanity will make sure we're the strongest force in the game." Throughout human space, construction projects that had been prepared for decades began accelerating. Shipyards went to full production. Research facilities focused on military applications. Defense networks expanded to protect every human world. The galaxy had taught humanity that peace was only possible through overwhelming strength. It was a lesson they would never forget, and one they would ensure others learned as well. Ambassador Kane's final words to the Galactic Council would be remembered for centuries. "You killed our faith in galactic law when you let them execute, Commander. Park, now you'll live with the consequences of that choice." Humanity had entered the galactic stage as peaceful explorers seeking cooperation and understanding. They would remain as the force that guaranteed peace through strength that none would dare challenge again. The age of human diplomacy was over. The age of human deterrence had begun.